Good evening, everyone. My name is Himali Sodhi, and I'm delighted to welcome you to Day 4 of Spring Fever, of Penguin Fever, the special edition of our annual festival called Spring Fever. This festival is to celebrate 30 years of publishing in India. Over the last 4 days, we've had a series of wonderful talks and interactions with some very special authors. The session this evening, though, is one very close to our hearts. It features a legendary author, one who is universally loved and looked up to. Ever since his first novel, The Room on the Roof, was published in the 1950s, generation after generation has been charmed, entranced, and enthralled by this gentle, unassuming, quiet man who loves nature, the hills, the people, and writes about them as no one else can. His rusty stories have stayed with us through our growing up years and beyond. We've all loved his novels, his ghost stories, his poems, his non-fiction, written for children and grown-ups alike. The joy of reading him is to rediscover our childhood joys and innocence all over again. The thrill of meeting the man is no less. We are absolutely delighted to bring to you the man from the hills, to talk about some of his favorite things: books, characters, lemon cheesecake, and his latest penguin book, which is a work of absolute beauty, Words from the Hills. You'll see artworks from the book all around here today. And his forthcoming book from Puffin, The Clouds Roll By. I'm honored and absolutely delighted to welcome on stage the one and only Ruskin Bond. In conversation with Ruskin this evening is Sanjoy Roy, a friend to many of us in publishing and producer of the acclaimed Jaipur Literature Festival. Sanjoy is the managing director of Teamwork Arts with offices in many cities around the world. He has directed and produced over a wide range of films and television shows, including drama series, game shows, news magazines, and lifestyle programs. Welcome, Sanjoy. All it remains for me now is to hand over the stage to the both of you, not coming in between the stage and you and your favorite author. Ladies and gentlemen, Ruskin Bond.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Himali. Thank you so much, Penguin, for putting this incredible event together. Before I start asking Bon Saab ka chota bachcha ya Ruksan a few questions, let me ask all of you, how many of you have read a book or many of his books of Ruskin Bond? Ruskin, that's a sort of entry. You said, when you first started writing, you weren't sure whether anybody would read you, whether you'd be published, whether you would acclaim any fame sitting all the way up, first in Dehradun and later in Mussoorie. Now looking at this incredible audience giving you a standing ovation and looking back, what do you feel?
Well, first, thank you, Himali, for your introduction and for calling me a quiet, unassuming man. She hasn't heard or seen me when I'm in one of my grumpy moods. Huh? Thank you. And you're right, when I set out and started writing, over 60 years ago, there were very few people who read my books or stories. So it's really gratifying and wonderful for me to know that there are so many now who do read them. And some of these stories were written by me then, when I was in my 20s or 30s. But I still write, and if anything, I'm a little more romantic than I used to be. Thank you. So I look forward to Sanjoy's questions and to yours too later.
Perhaps some of you will know that when Ruskin actually started writing, it wasn't so much books for children. His first book was a book for adults, Room on the Roof. And he was in London when he first met his friend and hopeful publisher, Diana Athill. Ruskin, if you tell us a little journey about that first book. I mean, you didn't discover that the book had been published when you came back to India till you saw the excerpts printed in the Illustrated Weekly with wonderful illustrations by, I think, Mario. So, but tell us a little bit about the journey, of your journey to England, and then, of course, the book.
Thank you. Well, that first novel, The Room on the Roof, it came out of a journal that I'd kept in 1950, which was the year after I'd finished school and the year before I went off to England, or rather was sent off to England. And when I went to the UK as to an island called Jersey in the Channel Islands, and I was very lonely there, and I was missing my friends and longing to be back in India. And I pulled out my journal and I thought, why don't I turn this into a book, into a novel? And so I did that, and then I showed it to, it went to rounds of publishers, it got rejected by a few, and then it finally found a home with the firm of Andre Deutsch, whose editor, Diana Athill, was quite encouraging. But she suggested I write it again, I'd do a second draft. So that book underwent in the end about 3 drafts before they finally accepted it and gave me an advance of £50, which was the standard advance in those days. And I used the money, and they were taking so long to publish it that I used the money to come back to India. So it was only when I was in Dehradun and freelancing and bombarding magazines and newspapers with all my early stories and articles that the book finally reached me. So in those days, no book launches, none of the drama and the hoo-ha that you have now, and no literary festivals then, no book fairs. In fact, if you had a friend or two and you went and maybe celebrated with a beer, and that was the end of it. So it was a very quiet and not in the least bit dramatic, that first book of mine. But it's around today, and it's in fact just been reprinted in Britain after 60 years. So somehow it survived, and so there must be something there maybe that's kept it going. Thank you.
Ruskin, I'm going to, because there's so many young people here, I'm going to take you back a little bit in time, even before that book, to the time that you used to be a voracious reader sitting in Nizamuddin when your father was perhaps ill or during the week, and used to listen to music on your gramophone, winding it up. If you tell all our audience a little bit about that time when you came to Delhi and the incident that you came to Delhi, and of course your love for books at a young age.
Yes, I have a soft spot for Delhi because I did spend a good part of my childhood here when I stayed with my father in 1942-43 on a little road called Atul Grove. And he was then he was in the RAF, in the Royal Air Force, and I used to spend the day on my own because he'd be off on duty all day. So I used to read a lot, and I'd also take off. We were quite close to Connaught Place, so I knew Connaught Place very well, even as a small boy. Would go there to the Milk Bar or to Wenger's or to the pictures, bookshops. So I have a sort of a fondness or nostalgia for the Delhi of those days. And of course, Delhi has changed, hasn't it, incredibly over the years. Huh? How it spread like an octopus all over the surrounding countryside. And it was just then the New Delhi, the capital area, Old Delhi, Shah Jahanabad. And if I wanted to catch a train, I'd have to get in a Tonga in New Delhi and go clip-clop all the way to Old Delhi station. There were only about 5 or 6 taxis in the city. And of course, then Delhi changed tremendously after 1947. There was a great influx of people from the West Punjab, and then over the years, it's just grown and spread. You know, if you wanted to go out, say even in the 1960s, you were limited to, say, Connaught Place and the cinemas there and the restaurants. It wasn't a great eating place as it is today.
And apart from your love for books and music, there was also the fascination with your father's stamp collection.
Yes, of course, now nobody collects stamps. I don't, at one time it was very popular. And he was a great collector, yes, not only stamps, he would collect butterflies and state crests and all sorts of things. And I became a collector too, but I collected books.
In many of your books, Ruskin, your own schooling days of the Gang of Four Feathers, for example, the characters from there sort of reflect. So you can read in many of the stories, say Somi, for example, or did you always look at the many friends that you had and the many incidents sort of that peppered your life and imbued that into all the books that you wrote?
Yes, school days and childhood friends always played a great part in my writing, and school days too. That's where one got one's first introduction to literature, in more ways than one. Because in those days, if you got into trouble, you got flogged by your principal or housemaster. You could get a caning, and the first time I was summoned to the housemaster's office to be caned, I took the advice of my friends and I stuffed a couple of books down the backs of my trousers. And so when I got the first whack, my housemaster said, "Bond, get that book out of your pant." So I pulled it out, As You Like It by William Shakespeare. So he said, you're not going to like this very much though. Whack, another whack. There's another book on the left side of my trousers. So take that out. So I had to pull out Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And you're going to get another hiding, he said, and whack, I got another there. So my first introduction to books was a very practical one. You know, you had to stuff them down the backs of your trousers.
The other time that you got whacked is when I think your principal or housemaster confiscated your diary and then read through that and read much of what you'd written or what you thought and you hadn't spoken about.
Yes, that was my first attempt at writing a book. I was just my habit of keeping a journal, and I'd put down some remarks about the principal's wife's figure and various other things, which when he found it in my desk, he called me to his office and he tore up my exercise book and put it in the wastepaper basket. So that was the end of my first novel. But there was no great loss to literature.
Ruskin, there was a time that you decided that what you would want to do is really write for a living, and you acquired your first typewriter on loan. You had £13 and then you borrowed the rest of the money. Would you share with us how that came about?
Yes, I think I came 1950. I finished school and came home, and my mother asked me, "Well, what are you going to do with yourself now, Ruskin?" And I said, "Mom, I think I'm going to be a writer." And in those days, it wasn't at all fashionable for a young man to be a writer. And she said, "Don't be silly. Go and join the army." And the army was a very popular outlet then for boys who did not want to go on to college or university. And but I wasn't too keen on that. So I was very determined to be a writer, and straight away I was sort of bombarding the magazines and newspapers in India with articles and stories, which is why today I've got a backlog of hundreds of stories, because they've been written over a long period of time. It's not as though I'm a hard-working person. I believe in lots of sleep, because the more you sleep, the more refreshed you will be when you wake up.
And I think your first story is the sum total of the fee that you were provided was 5 rupees, of which 2 rupees 50 paisa was deducted as subscription for the year for the magazine.
That's right. Yes, we used to get. The fees were not very big in those days. I'm going back to the 1950s. The most you could get was about 50 rupees for a story. And there was a magazine in Chennai which used to send me 5 rupees a month, and which was very welcome, because with 5 rupees I could see 3 or 4 pictures. You could go to the cinema. And then one month I got a money order for 2 rupees, 8 annas. So I was very angry, and this quiet, unassuming writer then wrote a very strong letter to the editor and said, "Why have you reduced my fees?" And I got a letter back saying, "No, Mr. Bond, we haven't cut your fees. We've simply subtracted 1 year's subscription to the magazine," which didn't survive much longer.
Loss has been always very much part of your world. Leaving your ayah in Jamnagar, losing your father, coming away from your mother. Has that sort of peppered your work? Has it given you a different perspective?
I suppose with most writers, I think your childhood experiences are the ones that really set you on the way, or influence you in what you write. And if you've had a childhood that's been, well, sometimes unhappy or disturbed, it could actually later in life help you to a better understanding of childhood and of children, and in fact make you in fact a better writer. Whereas if everything's gone easy for you and you haven't had any problems, then what are you going to write about? So really, I think for a writer anyway, these early difficulties are something that help him or her.
Ghosts and spirits have always peppered your books as well. Beena rocking away, perhaps in the rocking chair, and the sounds of the many spirits downstairs. Has that been always a fascination? And you've always had a very relaxed relationship with the ghosts and spirits that you've encountered, both in the forest and in your homes.
Well, I have to. Only half an hour back, I was giving an interview to NDTV, and I was asked if in my autobiography I've told the truth about myself, and I had to admit to all of you that I've never seen a ghost in my life. But I enjoy writing ghost stories. I can cook them up now and then, and I do know people who've experienced the supernatural and are very convinced that they have seen or experienced the other world. So perhaps they are there, lurking at the back, somewhere in the shadows. But we shouldn't be afraid of them. I don't see why ghosts should be scary or spooky. If they're the spirits of long gone friends and relatives, then they should be looking after us and helping us in some way or the other. So if there are ghosts, I'm sure I think we should be on friendly terms with them. I do at night sometimes. I'm a very restless sleeper, and the razai often falls off my bed, and I'm aware of somebody picking it up and putting it back on me, and patting me till I go to sleep. And when I put the light on, there is nobody there. So perhaps there is a friendly ghost lurking in my bedroom and seeing that I sleep well at night.
And your other association has actually been with animals. Everything from Susie the cat, who turned out actually to be perhaps Sousa rather than a Susie.
Yeah, so it took me a long time to discover that my cat was a male and not a female. So I'd called her Susie, or I'd called him Susie when she was small. And when I discovered that it was a male, I was going to call it Sousa. But then I discovered my neighbor next door was a Mr. D'Souza, so I desisted. I thought I'd get into trouble with him.
Granny Dera also had a huge influence. Of course, many years later, after she passed, did you realize quite how much she must have cared for you and left only her stuff in her will to you? But when she was alive, can you tell us a little bit about your relationship with Granny Dera?
My grandmother, she was very strict actually. She used to say little boys should only speak when they're spoken to, and not be greedy and be happy with one cutlet instead of two, which is why now I never have less than 2 cutlets. But I suppose we need strict grannies too when we're young. And once she locked me up in the bathroom, I remember, not realizing that my mother had stored a big box of Cadbury's chocolates on the bathroom shelf. And after about 4 hours of silence, my grandmother got very worried. Why wasn't I banging on the door and asking to be let out? And when she did finally open the bathroom door and found me covered in chocolate from head to foot. And being so wicked that I didn't just eat 1 bar of chocolate. I took 12 bars and I nibbled all around each one of them like a rat. Just to get even with her.
Your own mother, with whom you had somewhat of a difficult relationship when you were young, it was in later years that you actually came to understand her much more and were reconciled and understood perhaps where she was coming from.
Well, I think all of us, when we're young, when we're boys, when we're girls, we don't always try to understand or appreciate the problems that our parents might be having. And it's only when we get older and start having similar problems that perhaps we can look back and realize their difficulties. So I would urge all of you not to be too harsh or hard on your parents if you are having problems with them. But try to be a bit understanding. And if you're young and you grow old or get older and do well in life, look after them, look after your parents as well as you can.
I think a lot of the young people in the audience would love to know how Rusty came about to being, and how did you invent Rusty, and how did that happen? How did that phase of your writing come about?
Well, the character of Rusty, well, in the room on the roof, I've called myself Rusty, my alter ego, but this series of Rusty books I have to give credit to my publishers who thought, why not take all my personal or autobiographical stories and put them in a certain sequence. And even when I wrote in the first person but did not use the name Rusty, we made them Rusty stories, so that we had then a series of 5 or 6 Rusty books. So I think all credit must go to my publishers, editors.
You came to children's books actually much later, Ruskin. When did you started actually writing books specifically for kids? This was when you were 50, 60?
Well, even some of my early stories, did go into children's magazines, but I did not. I wasn't writing specifically for children then. I think it happened in quite by accident. In 1972, I wrote a story called Angry River, and sent it to a publisher in the UK. And the editors there said it was too short as an adult novel, but that if I shortened it even further, it would make a great children's book or a story for children. So being a practical person, I have only survived as a writer by being a practical person. I did therefore shorten the novel, cut it down by half, and it became Angry River, which was my first children's book. So really it started in a purely practical manner. But since then I've written some books specifically for children. But when I sit down to write, I'm writing for myself. I'm writing, just enjoying the business of writing a story or of trying to please the imaginary reader who might be an extension of my own personality. And I'm not really bothered about the age of the reader. It could be, and sometimes, that's why sometimes an elderly person might enjoy a story as much as a boy or girl of 9 or 10.
The other thing that peppers your books and which is fascinating is actually food, between your puri and chole, your curry puffs, and your golgappas that you obviously love. Has food always been a passion of yours? I remember the neighbor to Dera Granny's house used to go and spend time playing cards and we're hoping to get a goodie from her ayah.
Yes. No, I don't remember that specific incident, but you're right about the chaat shop near the clock tower. I was addicted to various forms of chaat and still am. And I once wrote a story called the Tikki eating contest. Somehow it's not in my collected works. I don't know why editors keep throwing it out, because it commemorates the time I won a Tikki eating contest at the age of 16 and ate no less than 32 tikkis at once. But when I submitted this record to the Limca Book of Records, they refused to publish it. And another record of mine that they refused to publish in the Limca book was, I have the record for the largest number of times being run out in a cricket match. That is not only getting run out, but running out all the other batsmen. Nobody would ever keep me in a cricket team because I didn't believe in this silly business of running up and down between the wickets. Hit the ball to the boundary by all means, but why dash up and down? So I would just stand there and let the other guy get run out, you see. So.
But you were the school football captain.
I was, and until I let in too many goals as a goalkeeper.
Perhaps some of you don't know that there was a time when he suffered from malnutrition because all he had was beans on toast, and he then realized that there was something wrong because his one eye started clouding up. Do you want to tell us about that period?
No, I will not talk about malnutrition anymore. No. I refuse to suffer from malnutrition again. And you can't in Delhi, actually. Huh?
Well, some street kids still do.
If I don't have money to go to a restaurant, somebody will take me.
Take me.
I'm sure lots of you here will happily take me out for dinner. Thank you.
Who wants to take him out for dinner? Oh, well, that's enough. That's at least 2 years full of quota.
I definitely won't survive now, I think.
Ruskin, do you want to paint us a picture of what Dera or Dehradun was in the time that you inhabited it, and then of Mussoorie.
Yes, well, all small towns, most of our small towns have become big cities. Villages have become towns. So there has been a tremendous, let's say, urbanization or growth of the urban areas, very often to the detriment of our forests or grasslands or even agricultural lands. I suppose it's inevitable because of the population growth, of the growth of industry, the fact that people have to come to cities to make a living. But it's a pity if so much of our, let's say, natural environment, our greenery, our wildlife, our streams, rivers, they need more protection, I think, definitely. And we must do what we can to preserve them and keep them clean. And just as the Prime Minister says, clean India. So the more we can do individually, the better. Because take a small town like Dehradun. It was a small 40,000 population, 1950. And today it's about 10 lakhs. And you can see the difference. There's a good deal of prosperity, but when you come in and when you approach the town, and I'm not just talking of Dehradun, but practically of 80% of our towns across India, you're met first by mountains of garbage and rubbish, and so that's a bit disheartening, and it's something that we could do without, I'm sure.
And Mussoorie, I mean, you love walking. Every book is peppered with your long walks, where you've discovered so much. Every alleyway, every forest, every tree. Mussoorie has changed as well, and you've moved from your earlier house because of the new road being developed into what is now your new house which you've bought.
Well, that's inevitable. It's not just Mussoorie. I think all our hill stations have got a bit overburdened and overcrowded, and they're very popular now. So there's the traffic is intense, and that leads to very often traffic jams and discomfort for visitors as well as locals. So times change, and the pace of life changes, and it has to. We must accept all that and go along with it. But at the same time, we must preserve what is good from the past and look for what is good in future.
Rakesh and Beena, who are your present family, who you, in a sense, discovered on your doorstep, will you share with us their story?
Oh, I've written about my family and my adopted family who have looked after me all these years. So you'll know as much about them as I do.
And do you want to tell us a little bit about the new book that's coming out, that Penguin is bringing out for you?
Oh yeah, I love to talk about new books. Yeah. Well, a few months back I did a book for Puffin called Looking for the Rainbow, which was about my time in Delhi with my father long ago. And this is a sequel to it, in which I show how I adapted to my mother's and stepfather's home after my father died when I was about 10. So this one is called Till the Clouds Roll By. So it's a sequel to Looking for the Rainbow, and I think Puffin Books will have it out next month. What else am I writing? Trying to write some new essays, poems, maybe another memoir or novel. There's always something on my writing desk, and I'm like a grasshopper. I go from one to the other and until something gets finished. But I don't work too hard. I think 1 or 2 hours in the morning is enough. Then a nice pre-lunch siesta, And if I have a good lunch, there'll be an after-lunch siesta. Because as I've said, there's nothing... Sleep is a wonderful thing. You know, we go through, after all, we spend... I think half our lives are spent in bed. We are born in bed, we die in bed. Unless we fall off a cliff or a mountain top or something, you know. Otherwise, I think the large majority of us pop off in our beds. And a lot else happens in bed. We're happy in bed, we get sick in bed, we dream in bed, we make love in bed. We won't go any further anyway.
Well, we could have asked him about Vu, who was his wonderful Vietnamese girlfriend in London, and a person who he doesn't name in Delhi, but maybe you should.
I'm not going to talk about girlfriends. It's out of date now.
What I am going to ask you before I open it up is, on this day of very divisive forces across the world, have you felt discriminated in any way because of your color? Have you felt profiled? I know that at the Taj, you were charged a foreigner's entry fee.
No. Oh, not at the Taj, no. That was in Konarak. Yeah, longer far away, yes. No, I've never been discriminated against, no. Except once I wouldn't call it discrimination, it was very funny. I was staying in a hotel at the airport a few years back, and the chap at the counter kept asking me which country I'd come from and how I'd come to India. So I said I'd come by stock, I'd been delivered here. And he wanted to know how come, what sort of an Indian I was. So I said, I'm a red Indian. And he believed that.
So let's take some questions from the audience. I don't know how many mics we have. Do we have 2 mics? So maybe we can do a clusters of questions, and it'll be wonderful if you tell us your name and really just keep the question short so that we can go across. So maybe let's start from this side, and then I'll work myself through to that side. So people on this side of the house, anybody? So maybe let's ask this young girl, and let's ask the lady in the blue at the back, if that's not too much of a problem, and then I'll come back here. Or you can come in front, yeah, you can fight your way to the front. Well, you can come to the front too, yeah.
Good evening, everyone. This is Madhurima, and I'm a student of literature. My question for Sir is, Sir, has there been any session, any time in your life where you just did not want to write, or like go on a really long period where you don't write, and would you like to share that experience, that particular experience with us, and how did the writing start again?
It hasn't happened very often because I'm a compulsive writer, and even in times when I wasn't getting published very much, I'm going back to the maybe 1960s, I would always write something because it was just a natural thing for me to do. But certainly there have periods when I was discouraged or had disappointments, when maybe a book didn't get accepted or failed or didn't do very well or nobody bought it. I might have felt a bit discouraged, but I never wanted to give up writing because that would have been fatal. Give it up once, it's very hard to start again. I had friends back in the early days where very talented friends who wrote very well, but because they had many disappointments and they were discouraged, or their stories or books were rejected, they gave up and did something else. They went into some other profession. Whereas if they had actually hung on and persevered and kept at it, they might well have succeeded. So I think if you have confidence in yourself as a writer, and in your ability to write, you mustn't give up. You mustn't be discouraged, or don't allow yourself to be discouraged. Never despair. And if you despair, work on in despair.
The girl in the blue, where's she gone? Yep. If you step out a bit, maybe we'll be able to see you.
From here? So I can't see you from here.
Why don't you just come through? Or come onto stage. We're quite happy to have other people join us. Yep.
So it's a momentous occasion, I think, for me and for all of us here. I think so. I am so out of words right now. It's like a childhood dream coming true.
Flattery will get you everywhere in life.
So this is not flattery, sir. These are my true emotions, sir. Sir, I'm an aspiring writer myself, and I was wondering if you could please share some tips with me. I've also written a letter for you, sir. Please, can you accept it, sir?
Certainly.
Thank you. So can I come up there?
Come.
Just give him the letter.
Okay.
Give him the letter.
So can I get the book signed as well?
The signings will happen in a bit.
Yeah.
I think what the question that she wanted was, she sealed it very well. You're going to have some time.
I'll keep the letter and read
Thanks
it.
a lot,
later.
sir.
We'll read
Thank
it.
you, sir.
Let's ask for the other question. There was a gentleman behind. Will you come up? Yeah.
Hello, sir. Hi. My name is Abhinav, and my question is that Hi, my name is Abhinav. My question is that over the period, like you have gone through a lot of political, like your writings are void of any political comment on the entire situation. Why is that so? Like you have lived through emergency and.
Any political comment. Well, he nearly did get arrested once during the emergency, but anyway.
But that wasn't political. That was for something
A misunderstanding.
No, I've never really been too interested in politics. Let's say I've never been bothered really as to what party has been in power in government, because my loyalties are to the country and not to a political party at all. So whoever rules or whoever is in power, I will sort of stand to attention and be a good citizen. It's because I am basically loyal to India, to the country. It doesn't bother me who's running the country. Doesn't bother.
So in this middle section, let's ask her if we can give her the mic, and then we'll ask. Okay, we'll come to you.
Sir, I'm a big fan of yours, and I would like to know that as a child, who was your favorite author?
As a child, I grew up on this big book of nursery rhymes, which was very helpful actually. Nursery rhymes, you learn rhythm from them. You learn, and they're full of stories. And then favorite authors were, I guess, depending on the age, I did read Alice in Wonderland and books like that, The Wizard of Oz, and Treasure Island. Stevenson was one of my favorite authors, yes. Robert Louis Stevenson. And I read all kinds of books.
Well, Penguin has put together a lovely book of his favorite short stories with a preface that he's done for each story, and I think that's available in the bookstore as well, I hope. So you can pick up that book. I'll come back to you. We're still in this section. Let's get the girl in the red and then go at the back. I don't know how they'll get it to you, but let's try.
So my name is Shreyanshi. So my question is that Frederick Jameson has this very controversial essay that, and he states that all the third world literatures are the narrative of nation. So my question to sir is that how far you criticize or support that argument through your works?
Sorry, I didn't get the question.
Frederick said that all books of Asian about narratives to the nation. How did that work in your book? I think of that particular comment.
No, I'm not sure that it looks. No two writers are the same. And certainly there are writers who reflect the social life and the social conditions of a nation through their work, and it could be fiction writers, just as Dickens had exposed the let's say the class system in Britain. But now looking back on Indian writers, I can think only of, say, Mulk Raj Anand, who wrote about class discrimination and caste discrimination in India, whereas maybe a writer like Tagore was more interested in, as most writers are, in the personal dramas or the personal problems and relationships of individuals. So I think and if you look back at the kind of writing that has survived over the years throughout the world, you will find it is not connected very closely to the political events that took place. There are exceptions. Of course, Tolstoy was writing about the Napoleonic invasion. But at the same time, a writer like Chekhov or Dostoevsky, they were writing about their personal lives and relationships and conflicts. So I think it's not important. You write about what interests you, and what is close to you. You don't have to you mustn't feel that you've got to write about some important social issue. That will come anyway in the newspapers.
At the back, how do we get the mic all the way to the back? Yeah, and this young lad, then when she finishes, just, in the black, then you take the...
Hello, Uncle Bond. Hi, Uncle Bond. Actually, I have been writing and posting a lot of letters to you. So I just wanted to know if you personally go through all your fan mails. That's that.
I'm in trouble now. No, I do get some very nice letters and sometimes very long letters. You know, I think this is because I don't use email. So people write to me by hand and by post very often, and I get some very good letters. And your letters, will you believe me if I tell you they're waiting on my desk? That with a few hundred more, and one of these days I'll get down to replying.
Good evening, sir. Sir, my name is Uday, and I'm a big fan of your writing, especially the India I Love, the novel that you've written. I want to ask you a question. Before you decided to pursue writing as a career, what did you want to become? What did you want?
What did I want? Basically, I wanted to be a writer from a very young age, son, but I did have a few other aspirations. I wanted to be a tap dancer. But I don't think I have the figure for it anymore. What else? I loved football, and I actually almost got into a team in Britain when I was there, but it was the third 11 of a team at the bottom of the 4th division. So I didn't see much future in it. But so my other aspirations were not literary ones, but I think I did the wise thing by sticking to writing, because here I am in my 80s, still writing stories. Whereas kicking a football around, I can still kick the football, but I'm not going to run after it, that's for sure.
And for those of you who don't know, he still writes in longhand using a pen and paper and doesn't have a computer. So...
But the trouble is, word has got around that I write in longhand. So now whenever anybody wants to give me an award or a prize, inevitably they give me a fountain pen. And the trouble is I don't use fountain pens because I use ballpoint pens. But they give me fountain pens. Ink comes all over your hand, so I'm thinking of
Changing that.
changes.
Let's have these two young people here, and then I'll go to the back.
Sir, good evening.
Where are you?
Are all the stories true about a grandfather having an anaconda, a small monkey, a tiger, a sterling?
Are all the stories true about your grandfather having an anaconda and a small monkey? The small monkey is true. I don't know about the anaconda.
No, you're right. It was a python in the story. Huh? But you know what happened? In the beginning, I wrote 2 or 3 stories about my grandfather having these pets. He did have some unusual pets, including the python. But the stories became popular. And then when I was asked, publishers or readers wanted more grandfather stories about animals, then I had to start making them up. So the early ones are true and the later ones are all genuine lies.
Is the story about the monkey doing unspeakable things true or a lie?
No, the monkey was true, yes. True. Yeah.
So my name is Dave and I'm a huge fan. So I wanted to ask the Uncle Ken, who you have mentioned many times, is he a real character?
Uncle Ken, is he a real character?
That's also an interesting question. And I did have an Uncle Ken, and he never did a day's work in his life. Because he had 4 sisters who were married to gentlemen who were reasonably well off. So he'd divide the year between them. He'd sort of spend 2 or 3 months with each of his sisters and carry on like this year after year. And then independence came. All these sisters went away. Uncle Ken was left behind. Nobody was going to look after him. So he went off to England. And over there, nobody was going to look after him. It's not like India where people will look after you when you're down and out. So he had to become a postman. And he became a postman on a bicycle. And he used to read people's letters.
Okay.
And start blackmailing here and there.
Okay, that's...
So...
Thank you, sir.
In the end, he got into trouble and got locked up for some time. But there you are.
Thank you, sir.
It's a long story.
Hi, sir. My name is Vilakshan. My question to you is how to read like you, like how to read like an author. And second is how to develop voice and style. For example, your style of writing is more of visual elements, very much inspired by nature, like words, like they have visual elements, like they are picturesque. So how to, for young, what are the tips like you can help like for young writers to develop their own style? Like, yes, you are an inspiration, but how to bring it up, sir?
No, I guess, yes, very important to develop your own style. If you look at all the successful writers over the centuries and in recent times, you will find that each of them had an individual style. In a way quite different from the normal or average, say, journalistic style of writing. So that's important. But to begin with, of course, I think you need to respect the language you write in, whether it's English or Hindi or whatever. You must pay respect to its grammar, to its composition, to the way, and not be careless in your writing. And then when you're fluent, and then you can start experimenting and developing your own style. Say, as James Joyce did. Now, in his early books, Dubliners or Portrait of the Artist, he's writing in a more or less conventional style. But then he starts experimenting in books like Ulysses, which is very difficult to read, or Finnegan's Wake, which is impossible to read. But that was his way of wanting to change and do things differently. So style is all important, definitely.
Good evening, sir. My name is Pranjal and I am from Dehradun. So it was a childhood dream to meet you, and I would like to thank Penguin for allowing it. Actually, I don't have any question particular. I just wanted a small interaction with you. If just want a question, I would like to know if I could get a chance to touch your feet and get a photo clicked with you.
During the signing, I don't think he likes touching feet, but you can do that during the signing. Just give it to him.
Yeah, I'll be signing some books after, and well, I can't meet all of you at once, but though I'd love to.
Okay, hi, I'm Smriti, and I think this is a day well made. But my question is that I think somebody touched upon this, but mine is more towards an everyday basis. So what's your best advice when you hit a writer's block? Like when you're writing something and you want to express something, you know what it's in your head, but you know you're not able to express it the way you want to. So how do you go about that?
Yeah, well, writer's block is something that I think comes to most writers. And what I do is normally I don't get it when writing a short story or an essay, because I'd have written it in my head beforehand. So I would, if you're going to write a story, you write it in your head, see it like a film, visualize it, and then you only have to put it down in words, in a way. So you're not going to get stuck halfway through. So you must plan it beforehand. And in a longer work, sometimes a novel or novella, you could get bogged down. So the best thing is maybe to put it aside for some time and do something else, write something different, and you could come back to it later on when your mind is fresh and you might see it in a different light. So that could be helpful.
Can we just get the girl in the specs and the white to ask a question? Yeah.
And
then one in front, and that'll be roughly the end. I'm sorry, but
the third remedy is a waste paper basket.
We'll have to do another session at some point of time to get the rest of the questions.
Hello, sir. I'm Ananya. I just wanted to ask that in some books you mentioned that you were an animal lover. So are you still an animal lover, and what do you feel about animals now?
I am still an animal lover, except I rather resent the monkeys that come in at my window. Sorry. I dare not leave my window open now. Last month my pajamas disappeared and found them hanging from a tree down the hillside. Then there's a particular monkey that torments me. It comes in with on the phone the other day. I trying to phone relatives long distance, and one day I opened my bathroom door. There was this monkey sitting on my potty. So I had to slam the door hard for it, and then only took off out of the window. So animal lovers, by all means love animals, but animals, I think, belong to the wild and the forests. Do not keep a monkey in your home.
Good morning, good evening, sir. Sir, my name is Jagrav. My question is, how do you enjoy in your childhood?
How did you enjoy in your childhood? I'm assuming, what did you like best in your childhood?
What do you like best in your childhood? Tell me. Where is he?
He's there. He's on your left.
Where are you, son?
In the red shirt.
So what?
In the red t-shirt.
Where's the red t-shirt? Okay. So tell me first, what do you like most in your childhood right now?
Like to play football.
Okay, I like to play football too. What else?
He studies in his free time.
In
He's
your
a
free
very
time.
Good boy.
I used to study sometimes too. Very good. They're so
You're fabulous. First time I've heard somebody say study in my free time. Give him a big hand. Come on. The last question right up front.
So there you are. The things that you enjoy in your childhood were what I enjoyed in my childhood too. Childhoods don't vary very much.
Except the study.
Except the study, yes.
Good evening.
Yes, he wants
It's on. Just stand.
Okay. Good evening, sir. As always, I've been a fan of your books since childhood. I just wanted to ask one question. Have you going to write a book about horses at any time?
A
That's
book
the
about
question.
losses
Horses.
or
Horses.
Flippity clop.
Yeah, the four-legged
Will you write a book on horses?
On?
horses.
Horses.
Yeah.
I've never. I've a lot of respect for horses, even though the only time I got on one, I fell off. But no, I don't think I'll ever write a book on horses. No.
I think that comes to the end of this wonderful session. Ladies and gentlemen, please thank Mr. Ruskin Bond, one of our most incredible living legends here. And thank you, Penguin, for making this happen.